Hey everybody, I'm Steph with BoardGameGeek, here with Rainer and David from Board and Dice today. We get to look at the very awesome tea game called Tawantinsuyu. How are you guys doing?
Doing great, thank you. Very excited to be here. It's yeah, and happy to talk about Tawantinsuyu.
I know, the
What
next
he said.
tea
It's
game.
great to be here. Yes, back to
Excellent.
the Central America this time. Actually, South
Yep.
America this time. So back to the Americas.
Excellent. So tell me a little bit about where this design started from. Like, how did you get this idea? How did this come to be?
Shall I take that?
Yes, absolutely.
How did this came to be? I worked a lot as developer and solo designer on Daniel Tascini's recent tea games, and in fact with Tekenu I co-designed it with him. And but somewhere deep in my heart, I'm a worker placement guy, even though this time without time traveling. And I had this visual that I want the board to be a giant mountain, and I want to be placing workers that never come off. And if there's a mountain, then somebody should go around the mountain. So how about I add a rondel? And I was like, okay, let's design a game that has a giant mountain in the middle, and you place workers, and there's a rondel in the middle. And then I called Rainer and the team at Board and Dice saying, I figured out 4/5 of the game. What do I do now? And then I had some great help from the team to figure out the last fifth.
Wow, that's amazing. And so tell us a little bit about this game and what are we doing? So you mentioned some of the mechanics where you're grabbing these workers and you're placing them down. They never come off the board. But just give us a little overview of what we're going to be doing in this game, and then maybe we can dive into the specifics.
Sure.
I'll let Rainer take this one.
So what you see here, so basically that pentagon shape in the middle, that's what the most of the mechanisms revolve around that. So you have the Coricancha, which is the temple in Cusco, Peru, which was basically the capital and the center of the Incan Empire. And then around it, you have then the hillsides with the terraced levels and so forth. And the majority of your actions are going to be worker placement, where you're placing workers onto the different symbols that you see there. So there are a whole lot of spaces that have 6 different symbols total, and you can place workers onto those spaces. And each of those spaces, they have 3 other icons next to them. So those are the tasks that your workers can perform. So it might be tasks to collect certain resources. There are 4 resources in the game. There's potato, stone, corn, and gold. And there are places where you can collect those. But then there are other tasks where you can then spend those resources. Maybe you want to construct buildings, for example. 2 types of buildings, some that have passive abilities that help you throughout the game. They break some of the rules in your favor or so. Or production buildings, which then produce different resources when you trigger them. And then there are other tasks related to things that you would probably normally expect in these types of games. So you can build statues, and they give you both an immediate benefit, an ongoing benefit, and then you can cash them in for a final benefit. And all of these things you have to manage by taking into account basically the placement cost of your worker. The farther away from your high priest that your workers go, so they're at the center of the board, at the top you see the 4 high priests are there, and there are 5 different spaces where those high priests can be positioned at the beginning of the game. And the farther away that your worker has to go from the location of that high priest, because the high priest, which is basically your role in the game, if you're sending someone out to do something, but they have to go far around the hill and down all the terrace levels, it's going to be more expensive for you to perform those actions. And so those are the core ways how the game works. But you can also, if you don't want to take a primary action to place a worker, there are different secondary actions you can take. Some of them are just a matter of how you're maintaining some of the things they have access to. For example, there are God cards, which are the yellow backed cards at the bottom right there. God cards, every time that you're placing a worker, you need to be able to put to play a card of the matching symbol. So just like there are 6 different symbols, these god cards also come in 6 different symbols. But now you also want to make sure that you have statues. If you have a statue, which also come in all these symbols, if you have a statue that matches that symbol, then you also get the bonus at the bottom. So in this case, that symbol, if you have the matching god card, you would get the gold resource. If you don't have that statue, then you basically forfeit the bonus at the bottom of that card. So one of the secondary actions that you can take is to get more god cards. There are other ways that you can get those as well, but that's a way for you to, in a controlled way, knowing you always have access to a secondary action to get a god card. There are also army cards that you can get either as a secondary action or some of the tasks. And the army cards, they depict either 1 or 2 soldiers on them. Most of them are going to depict 1 soldier. Some of them show 2 soldiers. And the god card or the army cards themselves, the resources at the bottom, you can always basically discard as a free action. If you have an army card in your hand, you can discard that card to get the resource at the bottom. But otherwise, you want to save these so that when someone triggers conquest, now you can spend your soldiers to go and conquest for conquest in 4 different regions. So in the 4 corners of the game board, those are the conquest regions. And they're first come, first serve. They have different costs associated with them. A number of soldiers that you have to either discard or flip face down, temporarily deactivating them. But then there are very powerful rewards that you get for that, as well as a bit of area majority during the scoring. There are 3 total scorings during the game where you obviously will get points based on things that you have progressed during the game. How far have you advanced up on the Sun Temple on the right side of the game board? How many different weavings do you have, which are that you get bonuses for those. At the end of the game, you get bonuses for the length of your tapestries, which are a collection of weavings and so forth. So there are a lot of things to where you can basically set a direction for your game, lots of paths to victory, lots of different things where the different components, depending on which buildings are out and which ones you have access to, which color workers you have, because each worker has a separate ability. Lots of things for these different mechanisms to interact with each other and for you then to build your path towards victory.
Wow, yeah, there's a lot going on there, but it kind of all comes together once you like sit down and like actually see how the mechanics work out. So I don't know if we want to like run through like a quick couple turns and just show off some of the mechanics.
Sure, we could do so. So let's use the purple player colors for now. So let's say that if that purple high priest was positioned on that bottommost space of the, yep, right there. And then as a player, you will have a supply of resources. You will have god cards in hand, and you might have army cards that are that you have in hand as well. So as a player, I would look at this and say, okay, what are some of my options? Maybe I would like to advance on the temple, for example. In that case, I have a couple of options for doing so. I could either go and take a secondary action to move my high priest if I have enough corn to do so. Or if I don't have enough corn, maybe I would like to build a statue now, because one of the benefits that you can do later in the game is you can take a statue that you built previously and turn it in order to advance on the temple. Mm-hmm. So in this case, let's say that we want to build a statue because we don't have enough corn, for example. So on the second level below the high priest, there is a space that shows the statue symbol. So it's right to the right of that white worker that was placed. Just below the purple high priest. So yes, right there. So that task is available for me to be able to build a statue. Now, in order to trigger that task, I need to be able to place a worker on one of the adjacent spots. As you saw earlier, I had that god card with the H symbol on it, which is the symbol that is right below that space. So in this case, I will play one of those god cards because I must be able to play a god card with that matching symbol. And then I will place a worker. Now let's say that I had a white worker, which is one of the priests. So I will place that white worker on that space. Now there are a couple of things here. First of all, I need to be able to pay the placement cost. In this case, the worker is not going around the hill. They're just going straight down from where my high priest was located. So now there's a descending cost. How far down the hill is the worker going? Now, fortunately, there are some steps there that I can use, and that reduces the placement cost, which would normally have been 2 food, which is a combination, your choice of potato and corn. But because there are steps there that the gray player had placed previously, I'm able to use those steps, and that reduces the placement cost for me. So I actually don't have to pay any food for that placement. Now, on the other hand, the gray player, they're going to score 1 victory point because I used their steps and took advantage of them. So now that we've determined the placement cost, now I would look at, okay, how many tasks do I get? You always get 1 task for placing a worker, regardless of the color and regardless of where on the board are you placing it. But then each worker has a special ability. The white worker, the priest, they are able to perform an extra task if I spend 1 potato. So I can go ahead and pay 1 potato. That means that I now have 2 tasks. But you also see how the white worker is placed directly adjacent to another white worker. Basically, the 2 white workers that are there, they're connected through at least 1 common task. And that means that this other worker that is now right next to mine, it gives me a bonus of +1 task. So this simple example just shows that you have to think about not only which worker you're placing based on how you can get extra tasks from that placement, but also where you're placing it because of adjacency to other workers. And of course, you have to have then the God card of a matching symbol when you're placing that worker. So now in total, I would get three tasks. And that means that all 3 of those tasks that are surrounding my worker, I can perform those. I can collect potatoes, I can build a statue, and I can choose to trigger one of my production buildings with a produce 1 task. And I can trigger those in any order. Maybe I don't have quite enough stone to build a statue, but I have a production building that produces stone. Or maybe I wanted to do the tasks in a certain order. You have to spread them evenly, though. So even though I get 3 tasks, I can't double up and say, well, I don't have a production building, so I'm just going to collect potato twice and build a statue. That's not possible. If you don't have you basically have to trigger each task once. If you don't have the resources for it, it gets triggered, but you forfeit the benefit of doing that task. Now, in building a statue, that statue would then be placed permanently in front of me. And there are reminders all over the game board in the top left above that pentagon shape. There are reminders of the cost for the statues, for example. So a large statue costs 3 stone and 2 gold. Small statue costs 3 stone. They immediately give you either 9 or 3 victory points. On the other side of the board, there's also a reminder, if you're building steps, what do those cost? What are the immediate benefits? And then all of these, the tasks, the secondary actions, all of those are also, there's a reminder on your on the player aid that each player has. And it's very comprehensive. It covers all the information about how each task works, how the secondary actions work, how the festival scoring works, and all of those things. Now, one thing that is interesting here, because it's worker placement, so normally in a worker placement game, you have some phase where the workers come off the board, but here they don't. So, David, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So basically, because for me it was both a thematical and the mechanism driven choice why they never come off is theme wise we are starting from a tiny village at the bottom and the temple at the top of the mountain, and we all know the pictures of the Incan mountain farming. Is that how it's called? Terraced farming. So I wanted to achieve that. Look, we're placing all the meeples along the mountain, and it feels Incan in its mechanisms. And then the second thing is that I discovered more and more recently that what I love most in in crunchy Euro games is the sort of positive interaction where me doing something not only blocks your spot, but also creates a new good option for you. And I think Rainer mentioned it when he went through the how do you get tasks, that if you put a meeple next to another colored meeple, you get an extra task. So by me taking your favorite spot and it might at first glance it's a bad thing, but once there are two same colored meeples next to each other, there is always a third spot where you can put to be adjacent to both of them and get a third task. And usually getting a third task is quite an effort. A fourth is near impossible, and the fifth is you deserve a medal. So to me, that's what makes this not yet another worker placement. Here I draft this space kind of mechanism, is the positive interaction on the spaces, and then the other main thing to me is the rondel, that, as Rainer explained, the secondary actions, you have to figure out where to be when, because it affects both your costs and the actions, but that triggers things to other people because that's positive interaction again. So recently I just found I enjoy it more and more if I can create these positive reactions of ooh, that gave me a better move kind of feelings. And here I try to loop it all together and make everything speak to that.
Yeah, so I think I've played this a few times now, and I think I've definitely undervalued the secondary actions, and so I didn't use the rondelle to my benefit, and so Rainer, did this to me. But
Yes.
so I need to focus on when the optimal time is to try and use the secondary actions, because I try and get all the things I need during the actions I'm taking, like resources, like extra guys and the resources, extra cards. But taking those secondary actions to get the little bit of extra stuff is like so critical, and like timing is everything.
What I tend to give as a strategy advice to like heavy gamers when they sit down to play this for the first time, and I'm like confident that they'll get the rules and everything, is that your worker placement is to set up your stuff. Your payoff is all on the rondel. So
Yes.
like somebody said, oh, we found this combo and that combo, and they scored so many points, and I'm like, okay, how many points? Well, we finished around 60 or 70. How many times have you moved on the rondel? Well, the first time we did it was before the second festival. I'm like, okay, so you could double your score if you did that a bit more. So
Yeah.
it's the payoff. It's finding the right timing. And if in a 4-player game, 2 players are conquering a lot, while they're competing with each other, they're also enhancing each other because they're raising the multiplier. If 2 people are chucking corn into the temple, then they're competing with each other, but they're enhancing each other compared to the other 2. So everything enhances everything. And if you just, I got 3 stone and I spent my 3 stone for 4 victory points, then you're missing out. So to me, this is interaction with interaction.
And at the same time, and Steph, you can attest to this as well. This is a game that when you first hear the summary of, okay, this is how everything works, there are a lot of rules, and especially the player aid, there's a lot of information on it. But once you start playing it, the game becomes quickly less intimidating. It's not difficult to understand the game and the mechanisms. You get that, okay, I go here, I collect resources, I come here and I spend them. But it's in how you take all of those moving parts and now build your engine. Now you build your strategy. How much am I going to conquer? How much am I going to, should I buy statues? Maybe I'm sacrificing getting multiple tasks because I'm going for places that give me a lot of statues. On the other hand, that triggers the bonuses on the god cards. Being able to weigh those options and say, when is the right thing to do something? Should I trigger conquest now, or should I wait for you to trigger it? How often should I recruit from the village, which then acts as the timing for when you trigger the festival and so forth? So it's those are and that's also, I think, at least for me as well, those are the things that I think is fun. Yes, it's great to try to figure out the mechanisms of the game itself, but I want to be able to figure out the strategy, right? That's where the weight and the interest for me comes in, and that's, like you said too, yeah, you sit there and you, oh man, I'm doing great. And you feel great the first few times that you're playing it. You got 50 points. Now, once you've played the game 20 times and you look back and you're like, man, 50 points, that's, yeah. And that's what's fun too, is that this is a game that will grow with you and you will continue to discover things. You will continue to see, oh man, if I do it this way, that is just so much more beneficial. And you're rewarded for focusing on certain things, but you're also rewarded for trying to tie certain actions together and so forth. So
there is a chat question. How does the solo mode work?
So yes, solo is always in the package. I these days, having worked on, I've forgotten how many dozens of heavy Euro solo modes, I always look at which game is the most similar to this one, the next one, and how can I evolve the solo mode of that one. And since this is a two-step worker placement game, and last time I did a two-step worker placement game, there was a certain time machine involved. So I took the flowchart idea of the Chronobot and adopted it to the interactions and the subtleties of this game. So essentially, every round you when it's the bot's turn, you roll a die that picks which space it will block closest to its high priest, and then independently of where that worker is placed, because otherwise the bot would have too many priorities to figure out, it either gets some resources or builds some things, and once it got enough things, then it advances on the high priest and triggers a corn scoring or a conquest scoring or one of those things. So
and we can show the solo. So it's on the back of the player aid is the solo.
The player aid is fantastic, by the way. It tells you everything you need to know. So it's a big player aid,
for
but
the entire months of playtesting. Literally, the way I always demoed this game is: here's the player aid. I'm gonna explain to you what all those sentences mean, and then you're gonna start playing, and you're gonna stop me if you have rule questions, but you won't.
All right.
Yeah, and it's at least good that there's a reference there, right? So there's a reminder of everything. So even if it doesn't tell you how that works together, but it tells you how everything functions. So
yeah, flowcharts with circles with numbers in it will be a familiar solo mode sight to anybody who has played my previous worker placement ones.
Yeah. Well, we're just about out of time, so I want to make sure you guys let us know when it's available. How can people get their hands on this juicy, crunchy, heavy game?
So if you are in the United States, the game is available today. So it's today is the release date for it. It's available in distribution. If you live in Europe, unfortunately, Customs decided to they wanted to delay it in processing. So it's at the port. It's awaiting processing through Customs, and then it will be. So we're looking at the first week or two of November is when it will be available in Europe. Depends on how quickly it goes through Customs. But it's there, so it's just a matter of the bureaucracy of getting it processed.
We're not holding it back.
Correct.
Excellent. So you guys, everybody, if you're in the United States, go get it today. Tawantinsuyu. You guys are always a pleasure to talk to. Thank you, Rainer and David, for joining us today.